Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show for a second time judicial corruption and court reform victim, whistleblower, and advocate, writer and author, content creator, retired teacher, basketball coach, and a man who is single-handedly and successfully taking on the court system, Brian Vukadinovich. Brian is a retired teacher and basketball coach in Indiana and has served as executive director of the Posner Center for Justice for Pro Se's based in Chicago, Illinois, for retired federal court of appeals Judge Richard A. Posner. He has successfully represented himself in state and federal court proceedings in Indiana, including winning a federal jury verdict against his former public school corporation employer in Indiana in March 2016 for violating his due process rights in a 5-day trial where he represented himself against the corporation's team of lawyers. Brian has received national acclaim for his self-representation ability. According to Speakerpedia, Brian is considered to be the leading pro se litigant in the country, as he is believed to be the only person to have ever won a federal civil rights jury trial by representing himself without a lawyer. According to Speakerpedia, Brian is considered to be the foremost expert in the country in the art of pro se litigation, which is the ability to represent oneself, and has spoken on the topic in several different forums and interviews, including speaking to a Yale Law School class about how he was able to successfully represent himself and win the federal civil rights jury trial against his former public school corporation employer. Brian has also written 2 highly acclaimed books on the topic, the first one being Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, and the second one, Rogues in Black Robes, after he discovered from personal experience how corrupted the court is, as well as having success in getting around the red tape of lawyers and judges by representing himself. The first time Brian was on, we discussed his testimony in depth and his journey of self-representation in court, along with what he's learned and the wisdom he'd impart to others in similar situations. I will have that interview in the show notes for you guys to check out, and I highly encourage you guys to watch it before or after this interview. This time around, Brian is here to fill us in on what's happened since the last time he was on, including discussing the corruption of the magistrate judge in Brian's breach of contract case against former federal court of appeals judge Richard Posner, some media attention his story has been garnering, the truth about impeachment, and so much more. Understanding the court system is a cog in the wheel that doesn't get nearly talked about enough. And most people don't care about this topic until they fall victim to these corrupt systems who depend on their ignorance and trust. Brian's testimony and the information he shares and will be sharing today illustrates the various ways the courts operate under their own rules and jurisdiction that permeates beyond man's law, and how to prepare and interact with the court's rules of engagement with the confidence of a hero, just as Brian does and is. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast, share any information privately with me, or send me a written testimony for my upcoming book series, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. I've also partnered with a couple of my favorite brands to give you guys some discount codes on some of my favorite products, including Rife Technology frequency machines and blockers, and CZTL's high-quality methylene blue. Treat yourself to holistic health at a better price with brands you can trust. All of those links are in the show notes. and all of my personal links for all of my platforms that I'm on, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all on the other side of the screen for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, selfless servant and survivor and victim advocate, passionate pursuer of truth, black robe exposer, and a man who will be remembered as one of the most successful pro se litigants in modern history, the one, the only, Brian Vukadinovich. Brian, thank you so much for being here again with us today.
Hi, Emma. Thanks. You're too kind with your introduction there. I really appreciate your kind words. Thank you so much. And also let me say that that you are also a major warrior for justice, as I call it, because you're out there doing. I'm doing my part as much as I can, but you're doing even a more important part because with your podcast, it's a great podcast. You talk. You're one of the very few people around the country because I talk to a lot of people. And to a certain extent, a lot of the journalists are afraid to actually dig into some of the topics that you're willing to dig into and talk about and expose the corruption that's going on with different factors with judges and lawyers and government officials and so forth. So you are doing, your work is much more important than mine. All of our work is important, but I certainly appreciate you and your great podcast. And thank you for the opportunity, for the invitation to come back on. It's actually an honor for me to come back on here with you. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you on. Your last podcast was received so well. I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but society has this really false perception of what the court system is based off movies and TV and what we're fed by mainstream media, which is that the court exists to bring justice, that it's all about facts and evidence and truth. And people go into court and don't realize until they're way deep in the waters that that's really not what they're about, and so on your end too, it takes a lot of courage to come face that. Like, you're facing a lot of really powerful people that are trying to smash you and get you under their thumb, and you've just had this incredible journey of somehow overcoming it all and figuring out ways to whistleblow and share the truth without breaching, being violent, without crossing barriers that are set against you. You're figuring out all these different ways to get your story out. And I think it's so important. I think the court system is a really underrated part that a lot of people in society come in contact with at some time. And really they're not educated on how to deal with it, So what you're doing is very important, educating people on how to navigate these systems. So I know we have a lot to talk about today, and a lot has happened since you came on last. It wasn't even that long since you've been on, but there's been a lot that's happened, from gaining attention to different parts of your story that have happened. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you fill us in on some of what's been going on in your life.
Thanks, Emma. You summed it up very well. Indeed, there is a major perception, a false perception of the courts, actually, unfortunately, and I don't enjoy saying that, but it's true. People in the country basically have been and are being brainwashed in our country insofar as what the courts really are. Courts are supposed to be fair. They're supposed to administer justice in a fair and even-handed manner, irrespective of who is sitting on which side of the case. Courts are protecting influential people, powerful people against the regular people. The courts are basically have been designed to protect the regular people of the country against government-type oppression. But yet, when a person in our country tries to get judicial redress against things that are happening against him by some type of government oppression, and takes the government to court, or government agencies or government officials to court, judges sit back in those black robes. And because remember now, judges are part of the government. So there's three areas of the government that we have, and the judicial branch is 1/3 of the government. So unfortunately, many times when people try to sue the government, a government judge, and all federal judges and state judges are government judges, they do everything they can to help the government prevail in the cases. Now, I mean, it's documented. If you go into the court records and you look at all the cases that have been filed against government agencies, you're going to see that almost all of the cases, it's an overwhelming number. I actually asked the Administration Office of the United States Courts for information for the numbers of how many cases have been dismissed by the federal courts across the country against people. And this agency, the U.S. Administration of Courts, told me that they don't keep track of that information. And that's baloney. We have a computerized system these days, and anytime a case is filed, it's electronically recorded. And whenever a case is the result of the case is always shown on the public websites and so forth. So it'd be very easy for the United States Courts Administration to keep track of how many cases have been dismissed, and it's an overwhelming number. And that people need to realize and understand that there's a Seventh Amendment in the Constitution to people's rights. It's not a favor that the people have. It's not some kind of luxury that people get. It's an absolute right. It's a fundamental right under the Seventh Amendment to the United States Constitution for people to be able to file cases and have their grievances redressed in a court of law. Now, somewhere along the line, this ridiculous nonsense of summary judgments came into play. If people don't understand what that is, summary judgment is a tool that government agencies and corporations use to get people's cases dismissed. Now, remember, the Seventh Amendment says the people have a right to have their case brought before a jury. That's an absolute right under the Constitution. But yet, somewhere along the line, judges conjured up some kind of rule of their own that, we'll allow government agencies and corporations to use a summary judgment procedure, which almost in most of the cases they utilize to dismiss people's complaints. I contend that that's unconstitutional. I'm really surprised that some lawyer has not taken that on. There should be no such thing as summary judgments in federal actions and even in state actions as well, because the Seventh Amendment guarantees the Constitution as a fundamental right. But that's what the courts do. The courts do everything they can to stop the people from obtaining justice whenever they're harmed by government agencies or corporations. We have to lay full blame on the courts for that, because under the Constitution, that should not be happening. But as most people are seeing these days, the Constitution basically doesn't mean very much anymore these days. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So in my case here, what's happening, and I'll use my case as an example to talk about, to just specifically talk about just how corrupt things can be, even in a federal court. I'm in federal court right now against a very influential and powerful retired federal court of appeals judge. His name is Richard Posner. And Posner heard about how I won my civil rights trial in 2016. I represented myself against my former employer. It was a 5-day jury trial, and the school corporation had a battery of lawyers. They had a team of lawyers, and I was representing myself. So it was a 5-day jury trial, and I was able to win the trial. The jury ruled in my favor, awarded me 6-figure damages for the corporation's violation of my due process rights, but in that particular case, I did have a judge, and now we've talked about this, Emma, you and I have. Not all judges are corrupt. So we need to make that real clear. We're not on here saying the entire judiciary is corrupt, but we are saying that a good part of the judiciary is corrupt. And any part of the judiciary that's corrupt is too much. There shouldn't be any corruption whatsoever. So fortunately for me, I did have a decent judge. His name was Philip Simon. He was actually the chief judge of the division at the time. Things got off to a little bit of a rocky start with me and him. He didn't like the fact that I was proceeding pro se and so forth. And so we had some back and forth over all of that. And things kind of started out a little bit rocky during the trial with some of his rulings and so forth. But I think as the trial progressed, he figured out, he's got a good case here. He's got a strong case here. He's actually, doing a pretty good job representing himself. And maybe I should actually effect some fairness here in this case. And he did that, to his credit. So I have to give him credit for that. And but unfortunately, there are judges out there that are quite the opposite. They have their mindset. They are hell bent that if it's somebody of influence in the case that's either being sued or suing, that person is going to get all of the protections that judge can give that person. And that's happening right now in my case with this magistrate judge that I have. His name is John E. Martin. He's the magistrate judge assigned to the case. And then in federal cases, there's a regular judge, and then they have a magistrate judge that is assigned to the case that conducts all the pretrial matters in the case. And the regular judge is Teresa Springman. I'm going to reserve comment on her at this point. I'm not going to say that I'm very happy with her, because at this point I'm really not, because she's been rubber stamping things that Martin's been doing. But she's going to have the ultimate decision in the case and what's going to happen in the case in the end. So I'll just, in fairness to her, I will reserve judgment about her conduct in the case at this point right now. We'll see how she conducts herself when this is all said and done. But I won't reserve any judgment at all about this magistrate, John E. Martin. He's been conducting himself in a very corrupt manner. He has tainted the proceedings in the case to a very high degree. He's done a lot of things that require his disqualification from the case. First of all, in any case, there's discovery that takes place. Each side gets to conduct discovery. They get to investigate information, documented information. They get to ask questions of people, and through interrogatories and depositions. They get to serve requests for production for documents and so forth, and do other things such as requests for admissions and things like that. So it's generally a two-way proposition. And actually, the Supreme Court has made it very clear that discovery is supposed to be mutual on both sides. It can't be one-sided. And this Martin in the case, he has ordered what's called bifurcated discovery. The defendant in the case and his lawyers, and let me add that he has lawyers in New York, Chicago, and Indiana battling me. I'm representing myself. And I mean, why they would need all these lawyers in 3 different states, I think pretty much speaks volumes as to what the significance of the issues in the case are, and the fact that this is a former retired federal court of appeals judge, and they're going all out to make sure that the information from this case doesn't come out, and they want to make sure that Vukadinovich gets squashed here because he's out there exposing corruption and so forth. In fact, their lead lawyer, his name is Justin Ellis. He's out of New York. He has complained in the case. He has actually filed documents. Yes, there he is right there. Justin Ellis out of New York from the firm Molo Lampkin in New York. Justin Ellis. He just unbelievably filed court papers complaining that I have written books to expose judicial corruption. He's complained about my interviews. He's actually taken screenshots of my interviews, and hundreds of them actually, and filed them in the case. He's complained about the writings, the public writings that I've done. And it would seem that Justin Ellis here, that the people are looking at here, it would seem that he would have learned probably in a first year law class that we have a First Amendment in this country. And the First Amendment allows the people in the country to utilize their free speech rights. And if they have something to say about government corruption, that's what the First Amendment is all about. But Justin Ellis here, he looks at the law as a way to suppress people's rights to free speech by filing court papers, informing the federal judge in the case, hey, look at what Vukadinovich is doing. He's exposing judicial corruption. He's talking about things that are going on in the judiciary that shouldn't be going on. So that was his little way of sending a message to the federal judge in the case that we have to do something to stop Vukadinovich here. So that was just absolutely ridiculous on his part, and actually shameful conduct. And he went to the University of Chicago Law School, and that's really, to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School and then go out into a federal case and complain to the judge about a person's right to express themselves in writing books, writing articles, doing interviews about topics on judicial corruption is very shameful. And that does not speak well for the University of Chicago Law School if they're producing products such as Justin Ellis coming out into the public and complaining about people's First Amendment rights like he clearly has done in this litigation. Shame on him and his law firm. Now, the judge
Sounds like
didn't
he's
want...
threatened by you.
Pardon?
I said it sounds like he's pretty threatened by you.
He's very threatened.
Pretty petty.
He knows what's going to happen if we get into a trial in this case. He knows what I'm going to do to him in opposing all of the nonsense defenses that he has raised in this case. I should say bogus defenses that Justin Ellis has raised in this case. He is, let me also add, so I don't forget, he actually wrote a letter to this magistrate Judge Martin, not very long ago, just a few weeks ago. He wrote a letter to Martin, and he asked Martin, this is his quote now, to help and for assistance to put the case to a swift end. Those were Ellis's words to the magistrate judge, to Martin. He asked Martin for help and assistance. A judge has absolutely no business providing help and assistance to any party in the case. The judge's job is to sit in the middle and make fair decisions for both sides, not to help and to provide assistance to either side in a case. And that is exactly what Justin Ellis did in a letter to Magistrate John E. Martin, asking Martin for Martin's help and assistance in discovery to put the case to a swift end. And Martin has done exactly that up to this point. He has granted Ellis's wishes for bifurcated discovery, which means that Posner, his client, the former retired federal court of appeals judge, he gets to conduct discovery against me as to his defenses in the case. He gets to do discovery to get any information he can for his defenses in the case. They're arguing, they started out in this case, before the case was actually filed, I gave Posner several opportunities to pay the money that he owes me for the work that I did for him. I gave him several opportunities to do that. I wrote him some emails, I sent him a letter, and I told him, you need to pay the money you owe me for the work so we don't have to go into litigation with this thing. So he ignored it. And then my letter was passed to a lawyer in Chicago. His name was Robert Kaufman, and he wrote a letter to me stating to me that medical records will show that Posner did not have the quote legal capacity to enter into contracts in the year of 2018, which was the year that he entered into the contract with me for my services to him. So that was what Posner's own lawyer said. He said Posner did not have the legal capacity and medical records will show that. So then eventually I had to file the case. So then I want the medical records that Posner's lawyer said will show that. And guess what? Ellis and his team of lawyers are arguing that I should not have those medical records. And yet they have filed defenses in the case stating all kinds of nonsense things that if I could just have a second here. Well, I'll get to those later on. I've got it written down here, but in a nutshell, he even had the audacity to file one of his defenses was that this is what Ellis and lawyers filed in court. They stated that I induced Posner to enter that contract with me, that I induced him to do that. And yet Ellis and his lawyers and the judges in the case, they very well know that Posner initiated the contact with me. He sent me an email and asked me to come to work for him. And Ellis knows that. And yet in the case, he does what lawyers typically are allowed to do in cases all over the country. They get to lie on their pleadings, in their answers and so forth. It's a big problem in the country. They get and in this particular case here, Martin's playing along with it. Martin knows that the defenses that Ellis and the lawyers raised are bogus defenses. He knows it because I detailed the information to him in the case, so Martin knows it. And Martin knows that Posner's first lawyer sent me a letter, told me that the medical records will show that Posner, quote, lacked capacity to enter into contracts in 2018. Martin knows that. He has the letter. It's filed in the case. And he knows, consequently, I should have the ability now to see those medical records. And Martin won't let me. Martin said, you know what? No, we're not allowing you to get that type of information. We're only going to allow Posner and his lawyers to get the information they need to get this case dismissed. I don't really need probably to say much more about that in terms of fairness. But one thing is for sure. I mean, the audience, everybody pretty much understands courts are supposed to be fair. They're not supposed to be one-sided. And for Martin to decide that I can't conduct discovery to prove the claims in my case, but he's letting Posner through his lawyers get discovery that they can use in their hopes of getting the case dismissed, that's wrong. And Martin knows that's wrong. And I have asked now that he be disqualified from the case. So he should either be disqualified, the judge in the case, Teresa Springman, should disqualify him. And also, when I filed my disqualification papers against Martin, I sent the filings to the chief judge of the Northern District of Indiana. Her name is Holly Brady. So I sent her the copies of what I filed so she could see what was going on. And I told her in an email that Martin is proceeding in a corrupt manner. He has tainted the proceedings, and that he should not be reappointed back as a federal magistrate judge. So your audience will understand how things work with appointments of judges and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit, I think, later on about things with impeachments and things with judges. The process is this: a magistrate judge is appointed. He's appointed by the other judges in the division. So there's no confirmation process. There's no Senate confirmation process with a magistrate judge as there is with a district court judge or an appellate judge or a Supreme Court justice. So I told the chief judge, Holly Brady, that he should not be reappointed again. And I told her that all of this information of Martin's corruption in this case, it should be put in his file, so that in the future, if Martin ever applies to be a district court judge or a federal appellate judge, that the Senate confirmation hearings will have that information, so that the senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee will have that information so that they can question him about his corruption in this case. Now, whether or not she'll do that, we don't know. Hopefully she will do the right thing and put it in there. So instead of concealing that from any further process down the road, because all judges want to advance. Magistrate judges want to be district judges want to be appellate judges want to be Supreme Court judges. So there's all kinds of advancements that are taking place, but there's a process. And the Senate Judiciary members, they need to very thoroughly investigate the judges who are before them, asking them to appoint them to these higher federal positions. And they're not doing a very good job of that, quite frankly, actually. I have never yet, and I watch every time there's a confirmation hearing for Supreme Court, they put all those on TV all the time. They don't put them on TV when it's just the regular judges. Those are going on all the time. So people don't see those, but those are happening as well with district judges. And by the way, I love your dog. I've been seeing some of the postings you've made, your dog there. I love your dog. I'm a big dog person. You have a beautiful dog. And then I have never, ever heard any of the Senate Judiciary Committee members ask judges when they're testifying, how many cases have you dismissed as a district court judge? As an appellate judge, how many cases have you affirmed for dismissal? It's a very high number, because if I'm on that Senate Judiciary Committee and I've got a judge in front of me who wants to be on the Court of Appeals or on the Supreme Court, if I see that he's handled, let's say, 500 cases, and that judge has dismissed 480 of those 500 cases, that's a red flag that people aren't getting justice in the country. And that question is never answered or asked. It's never asked. So that part goes by the wayside. So they put judges in advanced positions who are dismissing people's cases left and right in violation, basically, of the Seventh Amendment. So that needs to change. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we talk about this impeachment process. But this Martin, there's a statute, a federal statute. It's 28 USC section 455A. And here's what it states. Any justice, judge, or magistrate judge of the United States shall disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. So I cited that statute against Martin. My contention is that Martin, and by the way, when Martin ordered the bifurcated discovery, one-way discovery, he did so knowing that there are at least 4 cases in this division written by 2 different judges in the Northern District of Indiana that denounced bifurcated discovery. The issue came up in at least 4 other cases. And in every one of those cases, the judges said, no, we are not having bifurcated discovery. It's a bad thing. It's unfair. And those judges said no. But Martin said yes. When it comes to a former retired federal court of appeals judge who Martin knows has there's information there that helps support my case. Oh no, we're not allowing regular discovery. We're not going to do what the other 4 judges said should happen. Discovery should be a two-way street. We're going to make it a one-way street in this case. And he did exactly what Ellis asked him to do in that letter when he asked Martin for help and assistance in discovery to help put the case to a swift end, which is what they're trying to do, which should not happen. So that's the corruption that's going on in the case right now. And now, let me add this. Martin has allowed Posner's lawyers to dig into my computer and intercept all of my emails. Believe that or not, they hired a company and Martin allowed them to do this. And it took hours and hours and hours to deal with all of this. They have intercepted. I had to go through almost 6,000 emails. They intercepted all of the emails in my computer system, and also my Facebook, my Twitter accounts. Martin let them have all of that information, my emails, my Twitter accounts, my Facebook account. And when I ask for discovery, I don't get it. But Martin says, you know what? We're going to let Posner's lawyers conduct one-way discovery. They can get all the information they need to get the case dismissed that they think they can get, and they can dig into Vukadinovich's computer. They hired a company to do this. Can you imagine allowing a company to come in and dig into your emails and intercept? And that's what Martin allowed them to do. And guess what? I found out that Posner, see, Ellis filed a lie. He filed an affidavit. This is Justin Ellis now, the lead lawyer out of New York. He filed an affidavit in the case, and here's what it said. And he filed it under penalty of perjury. He said to the court, quote, a search of the Gmail account shows that Posner last sent an email to defendant on May 21st, 2019. Now he's talking about Posner's Gmail account. So now the audience might be thinking, well, what's the significance of that? It's very significant because they're trying to, after I blew their argument about legal capacity to smithereens in the case, because guess what? When they said that, oh, he didn't have the legal capacity in 2018 to enter into contracts, guess what? He was running the Posner Center of Justice for pro ses. He was teaching at the University of Chicago Law School. He was writing articles. He was writing books. And a year later now, in 2019, he took a job as an advisor to some legal corporation in California. And also, a year later in 2019, he got involved in a amicus brief. Amicus means supporting brief. Somebody filed a court case, and then people sometimes will file their supporting briefs, is what they are. Amicus curiae briefs, they call them. So he was able to do all of those things. But yet when it came time to pay for what he owed me, his lawyer come up with this, oh, he didn't have the legal capacity, medical records will show it, but he could do all those other things. Now, what do you think a jury would say to that? If we actually have a jury trial, which we should have, and I show the jury that, well, here's what Posner's lawyer said. He said he didn't have the legal capacity to enter into contracts in 2018, but he could do all these other things. He could teach at the University of Chicago. He could write books. He could do interviews. He could even a year later take another job, work on a case, in a court case, an amicus brief. He could do all those things, but he couldn't pay the money that he owed me from the contract that he entered into me. What do you think a jury would do to that? And this Martin is doing everything in his power in a corrupt manner to make sure that there is no jury trial in this case, because Martin knows that what happened was wrong, and Martin knows that if we have a jury trial here, he knows that I'm going to win this case. Martin knows that, and he does not want the people to understand and to know of the corruption that's going on in this case with trying to hide this information because the defendant happens to be a former federal court of appeals judge, and he's got all these lawyers in New York, Chicago, and Indiana. That's what this Martin is all about, and that's why he needs to be disqualified and he needs to go. Plain and simple. The statute requires it, and that motion was filed a little over 3 weeks ago. He should have been off this case 3 weeks ago. So they're sitting around now pondering, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Vukadinovich is correct. This is what the statute says. He's got all this information about how corruptly we've been proceeding in the case. And yet, if he gets off the case and a fair judge then is assigned to the case, then they have problems now. Because then, whoa, you know what? Maybe now I will get discovery that I'm entitled to. I'm going to get the information to prove the claims in the case that I can present to a jury. So that's their problem. That's their worry right now. And that's how corrupt things are in the United States judiciary. And that's how corrupt this judge is, John E. Martin, in this case. And he should be disqualified. And the judge, Teresa Springman, should be overseeing this and disqualifying him. And she should start proceeding in this case the way this case should be handled. And there should be discovery conducted in this case. And we shouldn't be having lawyers writing letters to the judge, asking the judge for help and assistance to get the case put to a swift end, which is exactly what Justin Ellis did with John E. Martin. And Martin accommodated him in every way since that letter was written to him. So I'm sorry, but it's pathetic what's going on. And if they think that the threats that are being made against me, Martin actually threatened me previous to the motion that I just filed. I had filed other motions about his tainting of the proceedings, to put it lightly. I filed some papers earlier, and I also sent those to the chief judge, Holly Brady, so she could see those documents as well. And when I did that, I put in an email to her. I told her, Judge Brady, here are documents I just filed regarding how Martin's conducting himself here in the case. Please take a look at it here, and so forth. And then I sent that, I CC'd it, I forwarded it to Martin. So Martin would see actually what I wrote to the judge. That's what you should do. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it's considered an ex parte communication. Ex parte meaning some type of communication. It could be in person, it could be, through an email or whatever, without the other side knowing about it. That's ex parte. That's the definition of it. So it was not an ex parte communication because I sent a copy of it to Martin. Martin got a copy of that email that I sent. So what did Martin do? Martin gets in a huff. He gets mad because I reported his misconduct to the chief judge, and then he retaliates and he issues an order threatening me. And he called it an ex parte communication. He said this was an ex parte communication, and he threatened me, cautioned me in capital letters, caution in capital letters, that if I fail to follow the court's orders and the court's rules, that I will be that I will I'm cautioned that I will be sanctioned. So when I responded to that, I explained, first of all, that was not an ex parte communication. You, as a judge of all people, should know that it was not an ex parte communication. You, as a judge, had no business writing an order calling that an ex parte communication when it was not an ex parte communication. And you, as a judge, had no business threatening me with violating court rules or court orders when I did not violate any court rules or court orders, nor did you, as a judge, state in your threatening order what rules or orders I violated. He simply conjured it up. He's a corrupt judge. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it because that's what he is. He's a corrupt judge, and that's what corrupt judges do. And Martin needs to be disqualified from the case. So he got mad because I reported his corruption to the chief judge. And because he couldn't do it any other way, he threatened me. Well, I got some news for Magistrate Judge John E. Martin. Here's a news flash for him, okay? His threats against me won't work. Very plain and simple. I'm going to repeat that. The threats made to me by Magistrate Judge John E. Martin will not work. And I'm also going to repeat again that if I ever hear of John E. Martin applying to be a district court judge or an appeal judge or whatever, I will make sure that the authorities know about his corrupt acts in this case in protecting this former federal court of appeals judge, Richard Posner, and his many lawyers in 3 different states, and the lawyer that wrote a letter to him asking for his help and assistance, which he has been quite accommodating with. So that's where we're at. They are worried that I mean there's been a lot of Reuters, Law 360, Bloomberg Law. There's been a lot of articles already written about this case, and it's making them nervous. It's making them nervous because the media attention is there, and they're what courts like to do. They like to do everything. They conduct as many things as they can in secret. They do not want the public. That's why they don't want courts in the courtroom. They object to all of that because they don't want the public to know actually what's going on. And they don't want me, and Ellis has complained already in the litigation, in court filings. Vukadinovich, look what he's doing. He's writing books, he's writing articles, he's doing interviews exposing judicial corruption. So they're working overtime to put me aside if they can. But it doesn't matter, whatever they do in the case, if it corruptly ends up that they dismiss the case, I mean, I'll fight that battle, in the courts or whatever, but it's not going to quiet me down. It'll only make it worse, actually. And apparently they haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, and I just brought up, you recently were featured in Bold Journey, and this is a great publication for you to be recognized in. You've been recognized and there has been multiple articles, but this one was a pretty big deal, and I wanted to bring it up so you could talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Emma, this was a publication. It's a magazine in California. They contacted me and asked me, hey, listen, we would like to do a story on you. We know you're doing some things here and with exposing judicial corruption and so forth, and we need to get your story out. So they ran this magazine article, and what it is it gives background about how all this started happening with me, with how I ended up, as a pro se litigant representing myself and so forth. So it tells the story about how things began. And boy, that would be another show. But just to make a long story short, back in the day, it was like in 1981, I was falsely arrested and brutalized and ended up in court, and I had bogus criminal charge filed against me. I was attacked by rogue police, and it was a case of mistaken identity. And then I had to go through a court. I had to go through a trial and everything. And then I was awarded an out of court settlement for the false arrest and the brutality. And then it upset the local police. And then I just kept getting arrested after that in retaliation over and over, 10 times actually. So, and then at some point, back then, I mean, I didn't know much about the law and so forth. I was just a teacher and a basketball coach, and I had to hire lawyers, to represent me and fight all that stuff in court and everything. Well, at some point, I learned about how corrupt lawyers are, generally speaking. Again, now not all lawyers, but there's a problem in the legal field arena as well. So then, to make a long story short, how this started, and it discuss it in this article here. I learned about a law in Indiana which required that when a person is arrested and charged with a crime, there's a certain law. It's basically a speedy trial rule that person has to be brought into trial within a certain period of time. I think it was 180 days at the time. I think it might have been 90 days. It was either 90 or 180. So I saw that law. I went to the law library and just did the research on my own because there was several pending cases. They kept stopping me for all kinds of nonsense things over and over and over again because of the out of court settle. It was in the newspapers, and the police chief made a statement about it and everything. So the police, and again, there are good police, but there are also rogue police. And I unfortunately had to deal with a lot of rogue police. And let's keep arresting them, and we got to quiet him down. It's sad how the government has such a big problem with people's rights. Let's be able to squash the people and step all over them, and let's forget about the Constitution. And when people actually exercise their rights under the Constitution, let's penalize them for that. Let's make their life miserable. It's just sad what's happening. And even sadder when we get judges like Martin and a lot of other judges, that actually play that game. They play along with that game. It's sad. So so when I learned about that law, I went into my lawyer's office the next day and I asked him, I said, hey, listen, I have a question for you. There are several cases sitting there against me. Now, I'm a teacher and a basketball coach in Indiana. And when you start getting arrested and you're a teacher, well, you lose your teaching jobs real quick over all that stuff. It doesn't matter whether you're innocent or not, because all they know is you were arrested. They don't have all the information about what happened. But the cases were all dropped, dismissed, found not guilty, and all of that. But schools took action because of that. So I didn't, I wanted those cases dismissed. I didn't want them. Some of them were over a year old, way over what the Indiana law read. So I said, is that what the law says? Yes or no? Am I correct in interpreting that's what this law says, that these cases should be dismissed according to that law because the time period is gone by? And the lawyer said to me, well, it's not that easy. And I said to him, I didn't ask you if it was easy. I asked you if that's what the law says. And if that's what the law says, my question is, why have we not filed papers to have these cases dismissed? And he didn't like that. And see, these lawyers, boy, when you hire the lawyers and you pay them the money, they act like they're the boss. But guess what, audience? When you hire a lawyer, you are actually the boss. You are the employer. The lawyer is the employee, not the other way around. And a lot of people don't, quite understand that. So I told him, I said, you will, by the end of the business day tomorrow, file motions to dismiss each one of these cases against me. You will file a motion to dismiss by the end of the business day tomorrow. And he said, well, that's not going to happen. And I said, well, it is going to happen because I'm going to file the dismissal motions. I will file those motions. And his exact words to me, excuse my language here, not terribly bad, but he said, you aren't filing a damn thing. Those were his exact words to me. And I said to him, you are fired. You are no longer my lawyer. You're fired. Your history. Okay. And I walked out the door. So I went home. My brother asked me, how did the meeting go? And I told him what I just said. I said he didn't want to answer the question. He wanted to hem-haw around the question, and then I ended up firing him. He wouldn't file. I told him he needed to file a motion to dismiss. He wouldn't do it. He said that wasn't going to happen. And I told him I was going to do it, and I fired him. So I went to my, now back in those days, this was like back in the early 80s now, we didn't have all this stuff with the internet like we have now and so forth. I'm not sure exactly when the internet, when all this came out, but I was operating on a regular typewriter back then. And probably a lot of your audience might not have ever even have seen a typewriter because everything's computers now. But there are still some typewriters around. There's a lot of people that really haven't probably ever been on a typewriter or maybe even seen one. I still had my typewriter from my college days, my Smith Corona typewriter. So I went on my Smith Corona typewriter and I typed out a motion for each one of those criminal cases to get it dismissed. And you had to type each one individually because it's not a word processor, it's just a typewriter. So I typed each one individually. The next day I went to court and I filed the motions. And guess what? The judge dismissed every one of those criminal cases that the lawyer wouldn't do. The law, even when I asked him about that law, he wouldn't tell me that that's what the law said, which in fact it did say that. And then he refused to file those motions to dismiss. So then I asked myself, well, what am I paying lawyers for if they're not, their job is to research the law and file the motions if they can be helpful to you. And then when I bring it to his attention, he should be bringing it to my attention. The lawyer should be saying to me, hey, look, the law is very favorable to you. I'm going to file these motions. We're going to get these cases. He should have been bringing that to my attention, not me bringing it to his attention. So I fired him. There's no way I was going to allow him, or actually from that point on, any lawyer to represent me. So that's how this pro se thing with me. Then I just, my brother said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure. I can't trust these lawyers, and I'm just going to do the best I can." So I went and bought a law dictionary so I could start learning the terms, the legal terms. I started going to trials and watching trials and so forth, and reading books and doing things, and just got pretty good at it actually from that standpoint, where I was able to understand how the process works, and I've done several trials now. I've won several trials, jury trials, in other cases too, and in addition to the 2016 case. I got sued. A lawyer sued me one time for money. It was involving the criminal cases. He was representing me and was just terrible job. And then started sending me bills, handwritten. You couldn't even, it was scribbling all over the place. You owe me all this money. And he just, normally a lawyer is going to make a nice detailed billing, an itemization. This was all handwritten scribbles. And then he sued me. So then we had a trial, and these lawyers think, well, we'll sue them and they'll have to pay because otherwise they got to go to court and they don't want to do that and they don't want to hire a lawyer. So I represented myself. So I put him on the witness stand. Name was David Noble. I think he's been disbarred, or he voluntarily gave up. He got into some kind of problem with, some kind of dishonesty in the law. And I think he was disbarred. He's been disbarred since. And so I put him on the witness stand. And I had a lot of questions for him about how, his representation in the case. And then I went through his scribbles, and I showed them to the judge, put it in as an exhibit. And the judge, her name was Mary Harper, actually another one of the decent judges. Actually, she's died a couple of years ago, I'm told, but she was actually one of the decent judges. She actually was involved in one of the criminal cases as well, and did this, and she gave me a favorable verdict in the criminal case after she saw the nonsense that was going on. And then we had the trial with this lawyer when he sued me, and then she was assigned. They brought her in. I had the other judge removed from the case because he was corrupt. And then they assigned her to the case, and she heard the case, she heard the evidence, and then she ruled in my favor against that lawyer. So it's I was on a phone conversation last night with a lady in Tennessee with her case, and she's having fits with her lawyers. And I have these conversations with a lot of people all the time, and it's just the problems that we're having across the country with lawyers, demanding a lot of money and not doing a lot of work for it, and sometimes even playing both sides of the coin in cases, and with corrupt judges that are going on in the case. It's a very sad state. People basically, I hate to say this, but the people basically are pretty much screwed in the country until something happens. Something has to happen. There has to be a movement in the country. Whenever something big happens in the country, we have these movements that are going on, and they actually work. These government officials don't like it, when thousands and millions of people gather and protest and so forth. They don't like it. And politicians, as soon as they see that, they get nervous. Oh, I gotta get on board with this thing. Otherwise, they're not going to elect me back in, the next time around. So that stuff works. And writing editorials and opinions. In fact, maybe it's a good time to get into the process of, the impeachment process and so forth. I wrote an op-ed for the Kansas City Star not too long ago, and what it was the topic was the issue of judges who lie at the Senate confirmation hearings in order to advance to the next level. And in this particular case, I wrote about the Supreme Court justices. As you can see the picture there, there's a picture of Gorsuch there, and Kavanaugh, and that Alito. They've been in the news all over the place lately with different things, with accepting vacations and millions of dollars worth of with Alito and Clarence Thomas. They're getting in bed with these people that have cases pending, and they're giving them vacations, and even in Clarence Thomas's case, a house for his mother, and all kinds of things involved in vacations and gifts and all kinds of things that they're not supposed to be doing. And now they are trying to do something about that, but we need louder voices with it. But what happens is each one of these judges, you're looking at Kavanaugh there, and then Gorsuch is there, and then we have Amy Coney Barrett, who's not in the picture there. Each one of those judges, when they were regular judges, appellate judges, they had to testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and each and every one of them testified that they would follow precedent, which means if the Supreme Court had made a ruling on a particular issue in the past, that had to be followed. That's precedent. And then when lawyers file briefs, they refer to those precedents. This is what has to happen because this is what the Supreme Court said has to happen. This was their decision in the past. So, but when they were asked, and I don't really like to get into the political issues of the things. Now, I almost have to say it in this case here because the political issue involving precedent that they testified, they were specifically asked about Roe versus Wade at their Senate confirmation hearings. So I'm not here to argue on either side of the Roe versus Wade argument. People have their opinions about that either way. So I'm not going to, discuss that issue. But what I am going to discuss is they were each asked, are you going to follow the precedent from Roe versus Wade? And each and every one of them testified, yes. Oh, precedent is important. We're bound to follow precedent and so forth. That's testimony under oath that they made. And then when they got on the Supreme Court, they voted to overturn Roe versus Wade, the precedent of it, which now we're into this quagmire now, with all the abortion issues and so forth in the country. And again, I'm not here to talk about that issue per se, but they did testify that they would follow the precedent of it. And then when they got on, they did everything but. So what I pointed out in this article was that, impeachment is available to get rid of federal judges for one reason or another, for dishonesty, for dishonest conduct. And lying to Congress is actually a federal crime. So what I was pointing out in the article, we know they're not going to get impeached because of the climate of the politics these days, between the two political parties. And to impeach a judge or a government official, you have to have 2/3 of the Senate to vote to convict for an impeachment. So that's not going to happen. We know that. But what could happen is they could actually be prosecuted if the government prosecutors would do their job and look at their testimony, and then what they did after they could actually impeach them for the crime of lying to Congress. That would be a way that we as a country can rid ourselves of these judicial miscreants who are on the courts in our country. And I'm not just talking about Supreme Court justices. I'm talking about any judge, district judge, appellate judge, any judge who violates their oath. In fact, when a judge refuses to violate their oath that they have to swear to when they take the job as a federal judge, there are case laws, and I've cited them in my writings, that is under the law, and there's case laws that is considered an act of treason against a country. That is in case laws. If the judge violates their oath to be a federal judge, it is considered an act of treason, and it's subject to criminal prosecution. I have written articles about that, about those types of things. And judges they're unfettered. There's no accountability. They pretty much do whatever they want because they know, well, who's going to do anything to me about it? Because the Senate Judiciary Committee doesn't want to call them in and do it. They don't want to do their jobs. The prosecutors, the United States attorneys across the country, they could prosecute these corrupt judges, but they won't do it. That's why we as a people have to get educated with this stuff, because we have to have a fair judiciary. If we do not have a fair judiciary in this country, now remember, the judiciary is 1/3 of our government. 1/3 of our government is the judiciary. And if we have an unfair judiciary in this country, we do not have a true democracy. I'm sorry to say that. To have a true democracy, we have to have a fair judiciary, not just something we call a judiciary. It has to be fair. And I'm sorry to say We do not have a fair judiciary in this country. Uh, Case in point, what I've been talking about this Martin, this John E. Martin, what he's doing is blatantly unfair. Blatantly unfair. There's nothing to do with justice with what he's doing. He's doing everything he can to help a former retired federal court of appeals judge escape his responsibilities and liabilities for his action. That's corrupt. That's a corrupt act. Therefore, that's a corrupt court. I'm sorry to say that. He can try to threaten me all he wants. It's not going to work. My book, Rogues in Black Robes, I talk about case fixing in that book. I talk about how a case was fixed, coming actually out of that court, the U.S. District Court in Hammond, and into the Court of Appeals, the Seventh Circuit in Chicago. I talk about case fixing, how a case was fixed in my case to help the police with those arrests and so forth. I talk about all that in the book. And Posner, the defendant in this case, he's in that book. He's in that book as well. So, there's a lot of information, that I've tried to put out there, and I know you have as well. And we have to get the public involved here. And how can the public get involved? There's a lot of different ways. Now, if I do a lot of writing about this stuff, and my website has a lot of my writings on it. I write blogs, I write op-eds, I write letters to the editor. My website has all of that on there. And my website has got a little over 170,000 hits on it so far. So I know that over 170,000 people have been looking at it. So that's a lot of people, and it's going to be even more. So up there at the top, you can see blog. You can see blogs that I've written about judicial corruption. And then under media are op-eds, letters to the editor, interviews that I've done, and so forth. I have to get our interviews on there pretty soon. I have to be honest with you. I'm not very good at the computer stuff. I have somebody right now. I don't know how to put the stuff on there. I always have to have somebody help me put it on there. So I got a person right now that's going to help me out because I want to get our interviews on there. That's the reason they're not on there right now. As soon as I can get this squared away, I'm going to have them on there because I want them on there. So I got a lot. People can read them, and then people can look at the blogs and the writings I've done. And even that op-ed you just put on there that I wrote to the Kansas City Star, and they can look at those, because what I'm telling people is you can also do this as well. You can write blogs. You can write letters to the editor. If you got some corrupt thing going on in your territory, in your area, in your town, in your city with the judge or government agency or whatever, write a letter to the editor about it. Let people see that, and then people, oh, whoa, I didn't know that. And then they start looking a little bit more, and then you can get a little bit of a mushroom effect with it a little bit. You can write blogs. You can contact reporters and ask them if they'll report on their particular case, what's going on. Because if we don't expose the corruption, it's going to stay there and only get worse instead of getting better. But if people would speak up and speak out, okay, and let the politicians know, hey, we're watching you and we expect you to do something about this. See, these politicians, they don't like to go against the grain either. These representatives and senators, unless they have to. But when it's a big public issue, then they put their nose out there in the forefront. They want to be in front of the TV cameras when it's a big public issue. But if it's just an issue that involves a regular common person, they don't want to let them have the time of day. So we have to get that out there. We have to write letters to the editor. Hey, I contacted my representative, my senator. He won't do anything. They need to see that written about them. So that way you can effect change that way. And so there's a lot of things. We have a First Amendment right in this country. We should be using it. We can't worry about lawyers like Justin Ellis, who wants to run into court and try to convince a judge that he should do something about my free speech rights. about writing books, doing interviews, and writing articles. Okay. Those guys are a dime a dozen. Justin Ellis is a dime a dozen. Okay. Those guys are out there. Okay. It was very foolish for him to think that somehow that was going to work for him, that was going to intimidate me in some way. And then somehow that judge knows that judge had better not try to interfere with my right to write my books, my interviews, and my writings. That judge knows that. As corrupt as things are going in the case, that judge knows that's hands off. So that was a very, very stupid thing for Justin Ellis to do as a lawyer. And it was a very stupid thing for Justin Ellis to write a letter to the judge asking the judge for help and assistance in discovery to help put the case to a swift end. And I'm addressing all of that. It's all documented in the case. That's why this case needs to go to trial. We need to get this case into a jury trial, which is something that they're working overtime for. And this magistrate judge, he better wake up and he better smell the coffee. He better disqualify himself and recuse himself from this case. Because if he does not, and he wants to continue in the case, things are going to get worse from this point on, because I will, in fact, address his corruption going forward if he continues to stay on in the case. So please, people, Emma's great audience, because I see the other interviews she does, and I see the numbers down there of all the people that are watching her interviews. Okay, continue watching her interviews, and she's a great way for us to kind of get things out into the public, and watch her interviews and support her podcast. It's the Imagination Podcast, great podcast. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be on here right now. So we got a lot of important work to do in the country. And Emma's, I'm going to say it again, she's a warrior for justice, big time.
You also, Brian, I just think you're such a badass. It's so neat to see how sort of fearless that you've been through going through this. I see a lot of people that go through court, and like you said, they become sort of the slave to the system instead of the CEO of their situation. They're letting the courts boss them around. They're letting their lawyers string them along, even though they know that what they're doing is corrupt. They don't speak up. They don't have the courage maybe to fire somebody, or don't even know that that's an option. And I love that you have just been, you look at this like a business. Are my employees acting with integrity? Are they stealing from me? Are they coming to work on time? Are they representing the company well when they're out and holding the standards of our core values? And people who don't, and people who are working out of that integrity, you call them out, you speak out against it, you get rid of them in some cases, and you share the things that they do wrong and correct with the knowledge that you have, that you've learned on, it's like you're doing their job better than they are, which I think is just really neat, and you don't let these people boss you around. And I think that's a really empowering position that you've taken, that I think, and I hope people watching, whether on here or anywhere else that you're doing media and interviews, I hope that sparks a fire in people, that they start to realize that, hey, yeah, why do I let people that I'm hiring and people that should be representing me string me along and tell me what to do, boss me around, and why aren't I correcting them and using my First Amendment rights, and why aren't I taking the liberty to learn about this? Because I think that's another thing. I love that you took the initiative and started diving into the court system and learning what the terms were and learning what each person's job is and what they're supposed to do. And so that way you can course correct whenever things are not going the way that it should be, according to how the law of the court is written. And that's like, I think most people's worst enemy is their ignorance to this. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Again, like, I think a lot of people think that they're very educated in the court system because we are exposed to it a lot through, like I said, media, TV. We are exposed to it. It's just the perception of it is so much different than reality. And I really love that you took the initiative to do this and that you had no problem saying, screw all of you, like I'm going to represent myself and I'm going to do it better than any lawyer could have. I'm going to know the judge's job better than the judge. I think that that's really what we need to do in a lot of these cases is dig into that. And it's not easy, learning the court system, learning these terms, learning legalese in a sense, like it's not an easy thing. But I think that's the best way that you can protect yourself is if you are reciting a law that is written, they can't override it. They have to look at that. It's just most people don't know what those laws, what those regulations, and what the boundaries are. And so they're basically a doormat and they let the court just run them over, where you're able to call specific things out and say, hey, like I researched this, like I know that it's this, and you're not cooperating and doing this. You're doing that. And that is outside of what this law is. So I really love that you've taken such initiative and your passion for this is so evident whenever you talk about it, and I love that you're doing podcasts, books. I love that you are writing articles. I think it's so freaking cool that you're putting yourself out there so much and helping people while at the same time you've been so respectful to the boundaries that they have put on you. You haven't retaliated in a way that has gotten you in trouble. You are doing everything with integrity and you're doing the right thing. You're doing something that's harder. You're doing the right thing over all these very easy wrongs that are very easy to do. So I really want to commend you on all your work too, Brian, because it's so cool to see you doing this after meeting so many people who have been victim and who have been prey to this system and whose lives have been destroyed. I think you're really an inspiration of what somebody can accomplish if they put in a little bit of extra work, if they get out there and, use their voice, and if they start learning about these corrupt systems, the way that they are versus the way that we think that they were supposed to be designed to be.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks for those kind words. I appreciate that a lot. And actually, you're the cool one because of what you're doing here. Because if we didn't have the type of format that you're making available, it would be much harder to get this information out there. So you're the cool one, actually. And what you're doing is just awesome. And you're right. People need to, we don't expect everybody to become a lawyer and to handle a jury trial and all of that kind of. We don't expect everybody to be able to do that. But what people need to do, they need to get a little more educated about what's happening with all of this stuff. If you have a lawyer, you're paying a lot of money. It's better for you to know a little bit about what's going on because these lawyers will take advantage of you. They'll charge you a lot of money for stuff that maybe they don't even need to be doing the stuff for or whatever. And it's not, hey, look, you say to the lawyer, hey, what's involved here? What do we need to do here? What's the law say here? You can actually go home on your computer and go and Google that law and take a look at that law. You can Google. When I started out, I had to physically go to the law libraries and find the books, the actual books, and go to the copy machines and make a copy. See, now it's simple. Boy, you go to the computer and you can, people can. I self-educated myself with all of this. I did not go to school for this. I self-educated. Now, it took a while to get to the point where I'm at, but, I wanted to get to the point where I'm at because I knew that I was going to end up having to do some jury trials and so forth. But people can, just get, they can acclimate themselves a little bit to, what laws are. We've been talking about the free speech rights, the First Amendment here today. Go in, dig in a little bit, go actually read the First Amendment. And, I don't know if everybody's actually read the First Amendment. Get it on your computer and see what it says. I talked about the Seventh Amendment today. Okay. A lot of people don't understand, as I tried to explain today, you have it's a fundamental right in this country to a jury trial given by the Seventh Amendment. So people can go on, type in Seventh Amendment to the United States Constitution, and you'll see what I talked about. And then you can say to yourself, now, wait a minute. Then why was my case dismissed if I had a right to a jury trial under the First Amendment? Then why was my case dismissed? then. And there's a lot of people, trust me, in that category right now that are watching this. There's a lot of people watching this that have had court cases dismissed, I guarantee it. So you can look at that on your own, and then you can ask the lawyer, hey, under the Seventh Amendment, if the lawyer says, well, I got to fight these dismissal motions now, you can say to the lawyer, well, you need to argue the Seventh Amendment in the case, because the Seventh Amendment gives me the fundamental right to a jury trial. Okay, say that to the lawyer. Give the lawyer something to think about. That way the lawyer knows, well, you know what? I'm not going to be able to hoodwink this client too much because he or she is doing their homework here a little bit. So I got to be a little bit more careful, and I better do a good job because they're watching. So educate yourselves a little bit about some of these things. It'd be good. It'd be a good thing for everybody.
I had a question, Brian, and I know that there's a couple more articles. I'm going to put them in the show notes. So I just want you to breeze through them or share whatever you think is important for people to know about them.
Yeah.
But if somebody's case is dismissed, is there anything that they can do, or do you have any advice for people? Because I think that does happen more often than not, and then people just quit.
If somebody's case is dismissed,
Yeah, is there any
yeah.
action that they can take?
Yes, absolutely. Whether it's in state or federal court, either one, you have the absolute right to an appeal in your case. So now what you need to be aware of is once your case is dismissed, there's a clock that starts ticking right away. It starts running right away on the period of time that you have to file a notice of appeal. Okay. And generally speaking, it's 30 days. In federal court, it's 30 days. If your case is dismissed, you have 30 days to file what's called a notice of appeal. And then you file that in that court and you inform that court that you are going to appeal the decision. And then the case gets transferred to the particular court of appeals that you're in. And like in my case here, I'm in Indiana. The Court of Appeals that this case would go to would be in Chicago in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. But if you're in California, it's going to go into a different. Now, if you're in state court, it'll go into your state court of appeals. So immediately what you should do is if your case gets dismissed and you want to appeal, immediately ask your lawyer, or if you don't trust the lawyer or don't have a lawyer or whatever, then go into the court rules and find out what do I have to do now to appeal this case. A lot of people are appealing pro se. There's a whole lot of them. There's tons of them. And a lot of people, do it with representation. So if you're pro se, you better make sure that you're filing your notice of the appeal in time, because if you don't, then it's a technicality. Then they won't let you file the appeal. And then it gets transferred. The case gets transferred to the appellate court, and then they set a briefing schedule. And then you have to file a brief. Very complicated thing to do. The other side then files a response brief, and then you get to file a reply brief. So that's how that process works. There's a whole lot of research involved with it. But that, in a nutshell, that's how the appellate process works. But be sure to file the note immediately, as soon as you can within that time period, because if you miss it by a day, you're out. I've seen those cases. You're out. You didn't timely file the notice of appeal. So appeal the cases. If the judges, these judges, they want to, a lot of cases get reversed. A lot. I've reversed cases. I've done that. I went to the appeals court and reversed. So it can be done. Judges mess up all the time. They just, they do whatever they want to do. They don't want to fall, like this Martin character here that I have, this John E. Martin, the stuff he's doing. I've got that all documented. I might end up in an appellate court over him. What he's doing, I've got it all documented. Okay. And I will document it and I will appeal it. So people need, if you got shafted by a judge and you can show how the judge shafted you, appeal it. Because there are a lot of appeals that are reversed. It's not impossible at all. So people need to understand, don't just go away. If, problem is it costs money. You got to pay an appellate filing fee. You got to probably pay a lawyer to do the appeal, unless you do it on your own. And then, something else, you got to make copies, a bunch of copies. You got to make briefs, and there's binders and stuff involved. So, it all gets a little expensive, but, depending on what your issue is, if it's important, fight back, fight back. Don't let them do it to you.
Don't let them step on you. Yeah, exactly. And
Don't
thank you
let them.
so much for explaining that. Because again, I think people get dismissed and then they're just like, darn, well, I guess, I missed my opportunity. I don't have another chance. And then they just stop, and it's like, man, there's always a way to keep going. It's just, having somebody like you to guide us through that. And really, like, that's why I really love your work because you're taking everything that you learned, you're getting rid of all of the mistakes that you made or maybe things that you thought were wrong, and you're putting all the stuff in order sort of for people to follow so that way they can have a shortcut and don't have to go down all the routes that you did to figure out the eventual answers.
Yeah, just don't let the system intimidate you because it's designed to intimidate you. Don't if I might say, I mean, I went through a trial. I had this clown judge. I mean, he should have been in Barnum and Bailey Circus dressed up as a clown. That's how much of a clown he was, okay? And he actually so stupidly denied me a jury trial. It was in one of the criminal cases, okay? He denied me a jury trial and then had a bench trial and let rogue police come in and lie out of their teeth. I had witnesses that came in. It was such a clear cut, case that should have never even went to a prosecution. So he was a clown judge playing Mr. Big Shot, playing along. Well, I'm going to get Vukadinovich because there's quite a bit of, I hate to say this, but there's quite a bit of that going on right now in the judiciary and the legal profession. Let's get Vukadinovich, okay? We got to somehow get him and quiet him down and get him out of the way. So this judge decided he was going to be the big shot, Mr. Big Shot, okay? Well, guess what? Then he puts a ridiculous conviction in and wants to put me in jail and all of that stuff. I appealed it. I won. I had it reversed. Okay. I mean, and embarrassed him. And the Attorney General of Indiana made a public comment to to the Associated Press. Okay, to the Associated Press. Oh, we don't care if it was reversed. We're going to retry Vukadinovich. We're going to retry him. Okay. Guess what? They didn't retry me. They knew if they would have retried me with a jury, because if they would have retried me, they would have had to have had a jury, okay? Because that's why it was reversed. The judge had no business. He had no right to deny my right to a jury trial. A judge said, "I'm not giving you a jury trial." Bad move. Bad move. No, you're going to give me a jury trial, not because it's a favor to me. It's a fundamental right that I have, a jury trial. And if you want to be a stupid judge and be embarrassed in the end, have fun with it because you're going to be embarrassed. And I did. I embarrassed them terribly with it. That's what we have to do in this country. So people, fight back.
Amen to that. And let's talk about some of these other articles that you've either been featured in or have written. It's so neat to see you going out and approaching people. I think that's another tool that people maybe don't realize is in their toolbox, that you're going to get turned down a lot, of course. Like you said, a lot of journalists, a lot of podcasters, they don't want to venture down these routes. But even if it's every 100 people, you get one that says yes, I think that can really make waves. And you're a testament to that, not just for the podcast that you've gotten on, but because you've had all these amazing opportunities recently to be featured and to write these different articles and blog posts that you've been doing.
Yeah, it's important. And I tell people all the time, get your story out there. This particular story here, it was law. It's a legal publication, very prominent one actually in the legal world. And it talks about, now I don't know if people are going to be able to open that one up because some of these newspapers these days, they want you to be a subscriber, otherwise you can't see the article or whatever. And I think that might be one of
Like
these.
you get a
Some
7-day free trial. So
Yeah,
it'll probably
do
ask you for your information. You'll just have to
yeah,
write a note to yourself to cancel it right after
yeah,
you read
yeah,
the
yeah,
article.
exactly. Do it under the free trial, exactly. And then this one talks about I filed that the motions to this for disqualification of that magistrate judge John E. Martin. So this one wrote a real nice informative article about it. And now we can't get mad if they say something. Sometimes they'll write stuff and you look at it like, I wish that wasn't in there or whatever. But I thought this particular reporter, Lauren Wood. Okay, she's very good. She's very fair. She stays in the middle. She reports both sides of it. So she wrote this article about how I file the papers against Martin. They should be disqualified. And then she put the information in there for the people to see. So, the courts are going to see it, the lawyers are going to see it, and it will make them think a little bit about, what, if we continue going down this road, we might end up, this might not be a good spot for us to be in the end. So, that's why we have newspapers in this country. The newspaper's job is to report, including judicial corruption, government corruption, put it out there. So a lot of people aren't going to, like usually a lawyer will say to a litigant, don't talk about your case to anybody, and publicly. I shouldn't, I know this isn't going to sound good, but I call them trained monkeys, lawyers, okay? They go to law school, they're all taught the same thing. They come out of law school, oh, don't talk about, they tell, hey, no lawyer is going to tell me that I shouldn't talk to, the public about it, or I shouldn't talk to newspaper. If there's corruption going on, okay, that's how we stamp out the corruption. We get out there and we talk about it. So the newspapers, a lot of them, now this Lorianne Wood, she's pretty good because she'll do it. Some of them won't. Some of them don't want to, oh man, I can't say this about the, the court system. They have a lot of power, and the publishers of the newspapers won't let them do it. So that's where we're in, in today's society. But like you said, talk to 10 reporters, you might get one of them to write about your story. And then that judge in that local area, they're, oh boy, I got to be a little bit more careful here and maybe start being a little bit more fair here because there's going to be stuff written about it. They don't want to see that.
No, not at all. And one of the other things I really love that you do is you not only reach out to other people and do podcasts and get featured on other people's platforms, but you do blog and you chronicle a lot of parts of your journey for people to learn about for free. And you do this on your own time. And I think it's really helpful that we have these different avenues that we can learn from you.
See, like that, what you're showing there. Now that's the one at the top. There is the one that I just wrote. That one's about this Martin, but underneath it, underneath the next one is one that I wrote about John Roberts, the Chief Justice. So I wrote about him, and you can go on down and down, and you can see. Can you scroll down a little bit? Maybe put a few of them on there. Oh, that's the particular art.
Oh, I can go back and share. Yep.
Yeah. And then you'll see, you'll see all kinds of different people that might have involvements with police, with false arrests or something. They could see that article. This one's about a lawyer who stole a lot of, he embezzled a lot of money out of the estates, made himself rich, and he got caught. So I wrote about that lawyer there. And that one's that headline speaks for itself there. They need to start doing their job, basically. And then this one here, this guy here, John Roberts, he needs to, actually start doing, he whines a lot. He cries a lot. Oh, the press shouldn't be saying this about our decision. No, the press should be saying it about there. He cries about all that. He's a whiner, so he should stop whining, was the point of that. And I got, other information in there about it. This one's, this particular guy here, John, I don't know if people heard of John Bolton. He was actually Trump's national security advisor, and he got involved in one of my situations. This John Bolton, he was an assistant U.S. attorney, and when I went to the FBI for help, when the police were harassing me with all of the false arrests and so forth, and the brutalities, I went to the FBI, and then this guy John Bolton, you'll see him a lot even these days on TV, because he was a former national security advisor. I see him on there a lot. He wrote a letter. He wrote a letter clearing the police. Oh, they didn't do anything wrong. So then I sent him a letter, and I said, "What do you mean they didn't do it? You didn't. All you said was they didn't do anything wrong, but you didn't interview any independent witnesses that saw a lot of these false arrests. You didn't talk to them. All you did was talk to the rogue police." So that was John Bolton. So I wrote about that in there with him. He actually thought about running for president himself. So I thought, well, I better put this article out there so people can get an idea what this guy is actually all about.
Wow. And you have, I mean, you just have so much on here that people can go check out. And there's a little menu over on the right-hand side too. People can click on particular topics or names,
Yeah,
and it'll take them to the articles that it has to do with.
yeah. I mean, it's completely free. I write them because I want to, now remember, I'm a teacher by trade, and I'm still teaching. I feel like I'm trying to teach the public about what's going on with all this corruption stuff, and that's kind of like my classroom right now. So thanks for putting all that on there. I mean, people can go on there and read the stuff. I don't do this for money. I do, I've never charged a person. I mean, I'm on the phone every night working with people, helping people. I have never charged a person one red cent for helping. I'm not about money. I'm about the issues and about, things, correcting things that are wrong to make them right. That's what I'm all about. So I wish people, would look at the stuff on here, and then it could maybe like, hey, no, wait a minute, I didn't know about that. And well, maybe I could write something like this too. People can write this stuff.
Yeah,
Do it.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I want to talk about your books and your website just a little bit more, just to share where people can connect with you. But I did have a question. You do write about some very controversial things, and even in real life, you're very targeted by the system. They, like you said, there's a whole team of people really ganging up against you. They're very threatened. Do you ever get censored online?
As a matter of fact, uh, this particular article here on the screen, Facebook will not allow me to post that on Facebook. When I put it on Facebook, they immediately remove it, and they don't explain. All they do is they put up just a general statement. The posting violates the standards, the rules, or whatever. And when you click to see what the rules are, I'm like, well, that didn't violate any rule. I mean, there's certain things that, they don't want to have on there. You can't just start putting people's, a lot of private information, and saying things. But, this is a public issue. Now, they have no business suppressing this article. Absolutely none. That's an example about how a media platform, a social media platform, is going out of bounds and suppressing. Somebody in charge of that department is somebody that came out of the sector of the government. That might have worked for the government in some. Well, I'm not going to have. I'm making decisions here, so I'm not going to let this article come out there because I used to work for the government, and I'm not going to allow any information to come out that's going to, show bad things about what's happening, in the judiciary. A person is making that decision, okay, and it's social media platform, and Twitter does it too. Elon Musk does it all the time, and he's done it to me on things that I've done on there, and a lot of people are complaining about it. But Facebook has no business suppressing that article from Facebook. Absolutely, and they won't explain it. That's what's sad. If they're going to decide to remove something, they should explain their action and give you an opportunity to appeal that decision. But Facebook doesn't do that. That's wrong.
No, and even most of the time when you do appeal, because I've suffered the same thing on multiple platforms, they immediately discard your appeal. So it's almost like it's just there just to have, but they don't have any intention of putting your content back up after it's taken down. It's already been decided before the appeal even happens. But I agree, Facebook deleted my whole profile years ago. It was back in like 2020 or 2021. I'd had that Facebook since I was like 17 years old or something, and just terminated it. Didn't let me know why. No option to appeal. And it was just like, dang, you really realize, just how controlled we are, that the information that we put on these platforms belongs to us, but these platform owners believe that this information belongs to them just because it's on their platform, and that they get to control our First Amendment rights. And it's really frightening, and people want to say like, oh, we have freedom of speech and we have this. And it's like, you guys, we really don't. Like, you can maybe in your own home, but if you go try to talk about this stuff online, whether it's the type of court abuse that you're suffering, whether it's human trafficking, if it's something that threatens people in power for society to know about, they come after you, and they do not have, any sympathy for just taking stuff down without any type of explanation.
And the key word that you used was the perfect word, control. They're controlling, somebody at Facebook is controlling our free speech rights, and that's wrong. They shouldn't be in the business of social media is First Amendment. That's what social media is all about. So nobody that has a problem with the First Amendment should be making any decisions about things that are being posted on Facebook. So that's the perfect word. It's control, and it's wrong.
Yeah. And they don't even offer you an opportunity to talk to a human about it, which is even worse. Like if they're going to take something down that is important for other people to know, and it's not something illegal that's going up, there should be a conversation, a human to human conversation of getting the opportunity, just like how we're supposed to have in court, to sort of testify and share about what the intention is, and to actually have sort of like a fair trial, but again, like these systems operate a lot like the court does, where it's just, our amendment rights don't apply here. They can make up whatever rules they want. They can take down whatever they want. And there's no, there's no sympathy or empathy towards it.
Well, see, if I could add, Congress could actually be helpful here. We've all seen these congressional hearings. They bring in these officials to come in and testify. Like they'll bring in somebody from Homeland Security and they'll ask questions and so forth. And I've seen them on there where they have questioned people out of the Musk's name comes up quite a bit, actually. They could bring these people in there because this involves the First Amendment, and they could have these people like Elon Musk come in there and make them explain how is it that you are suppressing people. This is a social media platform. You don't get to decide, because if you don't like somebody's free speech, that they don't get to exercise their free speech. You don't get to decide that. But that's exactly what's happening. And Congress could actually step in. Congress could call Elon Musk in and take him to task for that. And they could do the same thing with whoever's running Facebook. But that's why people need to speak up. Call their representatives. Say, hey, how come Musk is able to do this? How come Facebook's doing this? We need some congressional hearings on this. Because it's important. It's a First Amendment right.
Totally. And I think about the missed opportunities too. Like these lawyers, I think also they go into their profession. A lot of them don't go into it because they want to be corrupt. They go into it because they care about justice and fairness. And then the system corrupts them, coerces them, pays them, gives them incentives to do wrong, and they lose their courage and ability to stand up for themselves. Like they become, doormats themselves and just give in to the system, much like the medical system. And I just think, wow, like what missed opportunities too for these lawyers to just, basically grow a pair and fight it. Like there'd be so many people that would want to hire them. There'd be lots of cases that they could do involving multiple people. There could be many class actions that could probably go very, very well if these lawyers would just step up and say, you know what, I'm tired of doing these wrongs. It doesn't sit well with my soul. That's not why I got in this. That's not why, that's not where my passion lied. Like I wanted to help people, and I'm being coerced and controlled to do the opposite, and it's really sad how cowardly so many of these people are, but yet like we admire them. We think that they have these great careers and they went to these Ivy League schools, but they're all cowards, like they really don't do what's right. They succumb to doing what's wrong at the hands of, like I said, incentives and money, and power ultimately.
If I could just add in,
Yeah,
I love the point you just made, because I'm not going to say the name of the person. It's a lady in Tennessee that I spoke with at length last night, and she's having all kinds of trouble with her lawyers and so forth. So I suggested to her that she go to one of the law schools there in her state, and they have legal clinics. These law schools do, and they will assign students, third-year law students, to work on cases because they need the practice for it. It's part of the requirement of the curriculum, and they do it under the guidance of one of the professors of law at the law school. And I said to her, if you could get that clinic at that law school to help you, represent you in your case, and have a third-year law student doing your case, you'll probably have a better lawyer than you have. Well, you obviously will have a better, you don't, the lawyers aren't doing anything for you now. I said, you'll have a great lawyer with a third-year law school student. Now, and I said to her, and I wasn't really joking when I sent it. I really meant it. It was kind of funny, but I said, you'll have a great lawyer as a third-year law student. Now, you might not want that lawyer after that lawyer graduates and gets his law degree and then actually gets out there into the real legal world, because then they become corrupted then once they get out there. But while they're in law school, they're ready to tackle the world, and do good things. And that's how all lawyers should be. But as you pointed out in your earlier comments, then they get involved now in the power structure and the money structure, and then they get all woven up into that world, and then it's basically then all about them. It's not even about your case. It's about how much money can they make, who can they satisfy, influential people and so forth. It becomes all about that and not about your case. And it's supposed to be about your case.
100%. And so, like I said, I really appreciate that your case is so important, and you've done so much, Brian, for victims just by overcoming all these obstacles and not stopping and not letting them control you, but your testimony also speaks on behalf of so many that either don't have the courage to speak up or can't speak up for reasons of safety, or if they have gag orders, or if they're just not educated on how to sort of, find those loopholes to have a voice, so I'm really grateful that you're championing and being on the front lines of this movement. I think your work is going to be recognized for generations to come, and that it's going to really, I think your work is going to be studied for a really long time, and that it's going to make a profound impact as more and more people find you and get the courage to take their power back and realize that, like you said, they're our employees. We're not theirs. They don't get to boss us around. They don't get to tell us what our rights are. Our rights are plain as day. They're written in a constitution. Their roles are written very plainly in their curriculum. And like you said, you can find videos online to learn what their job descriptions are, what these different laws are in court, and it's not their business to breach those or to try to control us. And so I'm just so grateful that there's somebody like you out there, because all the people that I've had on my show that have been screwed over by the court, it's really sad that they didn't know all this going in, and they lost children, they lost jobs, they lost money, they lost everything just because they went in trusting, and, the system took advantage of them, and they were just so overwhelmed by it that they couldn't stop the snowball once it started rolling, and so your work is really, it speaks on so many people, and not just the criminal court or, just the court systems that you're dealing with. Like, this goes into family court and every type of court. All of this can apply to any type of court situation that somebody's in. It all has the same flaws, no matter which branch you're dealing with, criminal court or family court or anything. And so it's awesome being able to see you championing this so fearlessly. It's really inspiring. And I know that you mentioned earlier about your books, but I want you to go over these again and share about your books, because I think that's really creative too. There's a mother that I interviewed. Her name's Samantha Baldwin. She lost her children to family court to a pedophile, really powerful pedophile that networked with the court and knew people and got the kids. And it's been, probably almost a decade since she's seen her babies, and it's really sad. But she has taken to writing books and making them fiction, and she's sharing her experiences. She's not allowed to share a lot online because she has gag orders and stuff, but she turned her story into a fiction story essentially, and is helping educate people through fiction on how these systems work. And I think it's awesome. I think books are a really great way to inform people in a way that maybe you can't do so much talking. And it's a way that you can be very careful with how you craft things and how you say it, and I love that you champion that too. So let's talk about your books a little bit, and they can find them on your website. You do have a section, Brian's Books, and then they'll direct you to Amazon where you can purchase them.
Yeah, I had to write these books because I had to tell the story, and the first one was, we talked earlier about how the first arrest that I talked about, and then it kept following with one arrest after another, and how it cost me teaching jobs and how the courts were operating. Talked about some good judges, some bad judges, and how police operate, how they, because there's actually, we talk a lot about judicial corruption, but, we've all seen things on the news about out of control police, what they're doing. I mean, it's just, they're just, a lot of them are just completely out of control. I mean, and it's very dangerous. They carry guns. There's a lot of physical brutality involved. We all saw the George Floyd video. We all saw the knee on the neck and how that person lost their life and so forth. And then how and then I wrote about how when all this started with that false 1981 arrest, and then it mushroomed out, and then it got to the point where the police officials, who started out in Valparaiso, Indiana, and Porter County, and then I got a hold of letters that police officials were writing about me to other police officials in other counties. We had to deal with Vukadinovich, and if you have anything that we could help you with Vukadinovich, let us know. And all of that's in this book. All of the 10 arrests, how the courts handled them, what I had to deal with. I talked about what I talked about with the lawyer. I talk about all that in the book as well, with how he didn't want to come clean with that law that I asked him about. So all of that's in there. It's kind of a overall picture of things, how things started with the arrest, how I got to the point where I started representing myself, and then talk about the particular cases as they went on and on. It gives the people a good idea, an inside view of what actually happened. See, a lot of people, all they know is they see an arrest, they see in the newspaper an arrest report or whatever. That's all they see. And most people think, well, that person's guilty automatically. Just because the police arrested him, he's guilty automatically. And I'm going to tell you, it happened to me 10 times. And it was not easy, especially in Indiana. Indiana is a very, very conservative state. And it's hard for a person that actually wants to stand up for their rights, to have a judge that's not so conservative, and people on juries, because it's so conservative. It was hard to deal with. But I mean, I was able to do it, but it was hard. So I talked about the cases. I gave an idea of exactly what happens. I've got some of the letters in there that I talk about with the police, what they did. I actually have the John Bolton letter when we talked about John Bolton. I actually have a copy of that in there as well. And then I've got some other stuff in there with some court rulings where the judges determined that the police had no business stopping me and arresting me. And then I talked about the cases so people can get an idea of what's actually happening behind the scenes, because most people don't understand. Once a person is arrested, what goes into play after that, all of the political things that go on and personal things that go on. We got to get this guy. I had a target on my back for a long time, and still do because of what I'm doing today. But I could not go to the grocery store after that first arrest. I could not go to the grocery store without getting arrested for something of this or something of that. One of them was I didn't have my headlights on it at 4:17 p.m. 4:17 p.m. in the afternoon. You don't have your headlights on. And then when I would ask, see, it got to be a big thing. As soon as they stopped me, and I would ask them, even though I had the right to ask why I was being stopped, they look at that as like a disorderly conduct type thing, as a resisting type thing. And then right away, get out of the car. Then I got my hands behind my back. I'm handcuffed, and I go to jail. And then they put up other charges with it. And then I had to go through all that stuff. That's how that system works. That's how corrupt police systems operate. And the judge in the first arrest chastised the police. Why are you bringing him in here and prosecuting him? You should have let him go when you realized you had the wrong person. You should have apologized and let him go. And instead, you prosecuted him. You brought him in here. And then the police chief made a public, oh, our officers did no wrong. Well, that was then a signal to the rest of the police. Hey, our chief is behind us. So then whenever they would see me, they would stop me. And then they even went to my school where I taught, walked in with their uniforms, police uniforms on. And what happens right away when police walk into a school? What happened? That's first thing out of people's mind. What's happened? What's going on? Why are the police here? So they knew when they walk into my school right away, students, teachers, school workers, how come the police are here? Well, they're here because of Vukadinovich. See, that was their game that they played. And the principal told them. The principal told them, hey, he's a good person. Told them that. But that wasn't what they went there for. They went there so they could show themselves off to the public, because the public's going to want to know right away, why are the police here? That's their game. That's how they play that game. I battled them in court. I got all of, I mean, I'm 10 times, 10-0. I beat them every time, but it was hard. It was hard to do. And then you got people in school, employers that are stupid. They play along, that lawyers talk to them. Hey, we got to get rid of Vukadinovich. Oh, yeah, I guess we got to get rid of Vukadinovich. Then I have to go through all of that nonsense with the jobs, too. It's all in the book. It's all in the book. And then there's just a whole lot, that people don't really realize it's actually happening. It's very scary, and it's very sad. So when I see things that are happening on the news and I'm watching it with somebody and they might say, oh, no, that's nonsense. That person deserved to, be handcuffed. And I'll say to myself, now, wait a minute, we don't know the full story here. We do not know the full story. And see, like a lot of times police will do things to people and they turn their body cams off. See, there should be a national law. I've seen a lot of those. They'll brutalize people. And then when they go to court, they either weren't wearing the body cam or they had it turned off. To me, when a police agency assigns a body cam to a police officer, there's a reason for that. And the reason is obvious. We got to have the actual evidence of what happened in the incident. To me, if a police officer does not wear his body cam or has it turned off, that should be subject to immediate discharge right then and there. That's insubordination right then and there. Because if that police officer doesn't want that body cam to be on, that police officer does not want the evidence of what that police officer is doing. So there's a lot of things that need to come into play to help clean things up in this country. And I talk about a lot of that. I used my stories in that book to show people this is what happens behind the scenes with these false arrests and so forth. And this is how prosecutors operate. I mean, how many times have we watched the news and see a news story? Thank God for DNA now, which hasn't been around, that long. Thank God for DNA. There's a lot of people that are in prison. Some for I've seen cases over 30 years. People have been in jail. Some less than that. And then DNA will exonerate them. They weren't even there, will exonerate. But police, they'll lie. Prosecutors will lie, and then 30 years later, when DNA clears them, they get released. And in some states have it built in where there's money that they put into the process for whenever there's like a false arrest, and that they use that to pay retribution, the money for it. So there should be a law, in my opinion, a law where if a police or a prosecutor lie at a trial, that officer and that prosecutor, they should have to go to prison for the same amount of time as that person did. If they lied and that person had to spend 30 years in jail over their lies, then money doesn't do it. You lose 30 years of your life. That person, I had it happen to me, where there was evidence was tainted. That's the governor of Indiana actually pardoned a conviction that happened because I was able to prove that the police tampered with an affidavit and the prosecutor knew about it. See, there's a law called Brady versus Maryland where the prosecutors have to divulge all the information involved in the arrest to the defendant in a criminal case. and they tampered with the evidence. And I was able to get, I went through a corrupt court process with the judge in that one particular case. But when I was able to show that to the governor, he actually pardoned the conviction, and then the court had to expunge it. So those are the kinds of things that are going on. There's a lot of that going on as well. So we need a law, a national law for that. We should not be having police lying and prosecutors lying to put innocent people in jail, but it's happening. It's a problem. You can Google it. You can Google cases all over the country. You'll see that. And the only way to stop that is the accountability has to be those people, not just pay them money. Let's give them like $1 million because they had to spend 30 years in jail. Those people need to be put in jail who lied to have that happen.
Amen, Brian. And I'll bring up your second book too. You did talk about this one a little bit. This one is one that talks about basically the testimony that we went over in our first episode a little bit deeper.
Right. Now, by the way, that law I was talking about, I think it should be called an eye for an eye law.
Ooh.
You lie, and this person went to jail for 7 years off of your lie. So the eye for an eye law, that police officer and or that prosecutor, they also have to spend 7 years in prison, the same amount of time. A national eye for an eye law. We need that.
That's fantastic. I'm all for it.
Now, this particular book is about, I talked about the police cases. So I went to trial in Hammond, actually, in the same, it's not the same courtroom and the same judge. It was a different courtroom and a different judge. Had a very bad judge. His name was James Moody. And we had a trial with the Valparaiso police on the false arrest. And he would not let, I had a lot of evidence that was going to prove how the police were retaliating against me and harassing me and brutalizing me, including I had a police officer from the Valparaiso Police Department. His name was John Curls. Okay, he was one of the good ones. Not that they didn't have any other good ones, but he was one of the good ones. They had a lot of bad ones. A lot of these guys that I got involved with were criminals themselves. A lot of these cops from Valparaiso, they were caught with stolen merchandise and never lost their jobs. I mean, I had all the proof of all that stuff. They were buying stolen like TV boxes of some kind. This is back in the day now. Everybody's got like direct TV and all that. Back in those days, you had to buy a box, to watch certain movies and all of that, some kind of a converter box of some kind. So then they were buying stolen boxes and selling them to people. These were police who are supposed to be catching the people that are stealing the boxes. They're buying the stolen boxes and selling them to people, and they got caught. But they weren't fired from their jobs. And they give them a pat on the, okay, you're suspended for 30 days or whatever. You're a police officer and you're buying stolen goods and you're selling them out there on the open market. You shouldn't be a police officer. That's how Valparaiso operated back in those days. And then I had a lot of evidence about a lot of people that were being brutalized, that were outright brutalized. And in a civil rights case, you have the right to bring that type of information in when you're showing the pattern of the bad police officers. And Moody wouldn't let me put any of that into evidence. And then I had a police officer. He left the force. He just got sick and tired of what was going on. He was overhearing conversations with the police that were doing the stuff to me, how they're going to get me. He was listening to those conversations. And then he decided he didn't like it. And he decided to come clean, and he told me about it. And I asked him if he would testify. And at the beginning, he said, I can't. I just can't. I understood that. He said, I can't. If I do, that's it for me. Okay. And then he came around. He said, you know what? I got to do it. I'm going to testify. So I got him on the witness list. I put him on the witness list. And in court, these trials, you got to have all the stuff ahead of time listed. I have it all listed. He's on there as a witness. And then when I'm getting ready to put him on the witness stand, he's standing out in the hallway. So I'm ready to put him on the witness stand, and right away the police lawyer objects. No, objection, objection, objection. Absolutely no right to object to putting that witness, because he directly overheard the conversations, the setups that were being made. And Moody, the corrupt judge that he was, and still is, okay, would not let me put that police officer on the witness stand, because Moody knew that as soon as the jury heard him testify, that he heard his fellow police officers at the Valparaiso Police Department, he heard them, how they were planning their setups, how they were going to set me up. That case would have been done right then and there. And Moody knew that and would not allow me to put him on the stand. Basically fixed the case, fixed basically the verdict for it. And there's other things that I could say about it as well. And then so then I appealed it, and Posner, who I later became friends with when he contacted me about working for him. We ended up becoming pretty good friends, actually, and wanted me to work for him and so forth. I wasn't too big on him. He'd been a federal judge for 36 years, and he was actually doing a lot of bad rulings with people and so forth. So I wasn't too open to it at the beginning. But I went up there, I had dinner with him and his wife. That's how it kind of all got started. He contacted me. Hey, listen, I heard how you won your trial in 2016, and I want you to come and work with me. I'm starting this new company, Posner Justice for Pro Se's. I'm sick and tired of what the judges are doing on the Seventh Circuit. They're screwing the pro se's over. You know how pro se's works. You can come and help me, and we can do good things. So eventually I said, okay. And then we entered into our agreement, and I worked for him until the time he didn't want to pay. Then, we were friends. When he used me for my work, basically slave labor, okay, conned me into working for him. We had an agreement. And then I got to deal with all the nonsense now with these lawyers about first the legal capacity, and then now statute, all this nonsense stuff going on. Okay, well, what happened was he made public statements to the public, to the New York Times, to other major news outlets, about how he was upset on how the judges on the Seventh Circuit were treating the pro se litigants. He came clean publicly with that. So I said to myself, well, he must be okay, actually, even though it was 35 and a half years of rottenness as a judge in terms of rulings. He apparently has seen the light. So then I kind of was more open to it. And then he came clean with me after he publicly came clean about I left the Seventh Circuit because of how the judges are mistreating the pro se's. I don't like it. I'm going to now start this company to help the pro se's. Then he came clean with me, and he told me how this one particular judge, his name was Michael Caney. He's on the Seventh Circuit, and he actually didn't live too far from me. He's about a half hour down the road from where I'm at here in Indiana. And then he was on the Seventh Circuit. And then Caney didn't like me. There's a bad history with me and him as a judge, and just a bad history from way back. Then he became an appellate judge, and then he saw I had an appeal going against the Valparaiso police. And then he approached Posner, and Posner was on the panel. Hey, we can't let Vukadinovich win. Okay, we got to make sure that the police wins. And Posner accommodated him. And he came clean to me about it. And then I filed an affidavit with the Seventh Circuit and to take action against Caney, because he was still there as a judge. So I filed the papers against Caney, a judicial misconduct complaint, and that could be another show as well. That process, that's a real secretive process. And so then it's supposed to go to a counsel. Then the chief judge, okay, She she issues an order, she dismisses the judicial complaint. She did not. Now, if you got a complaint going on, just like a trial, you would call witnesses in to get the information. You have to have the information. Okay. So I filed the judicial misconduct complaint, and I filed an affidavit with it, and I explained what Posner told me and so forth, how the case was fixed and so forth, because he came clean. After he came clean against the Seventh Circuit, he came clean to me about my particular case. So I filed an affidavit with the judicial misconduct complaint, which I've done the research on it, almost 100% of the judicial conduct complaints in the United States are dismissed, almost 100% of them. And they, the chief judge did not, naturally what you would do, now he had just left the Seventh Circuit, Posner. She could have picked up the phone and she could have said, hey, Judge Posner, Vukadinovich just filed an affidavit. He said you told him that the case was fixed in that appeal case with the Valparaiso police. Did you tell Vukadinovich that? Did that happen? Was the case fixed? Okay. She could have called him and asked, she could have said, hey, come in, we need to talk about this. She could have done it over the phone with him. She chose not to ask Posner because the question would be, well, why didn't she want to ask Posner that question? The obvious answer is if she asks Posner that question officially and Posner says yes, that's what happened. The case was fixed. The appellate case was fixed. And I participated in it. The big can of worms that would have opened for them at the Seventh Circuit. So she didn't want to ask him that. Something else she didn't do. She didn't get a denial. She didn't go to Caney and say to Caney, hey, Posner allegedly said that you had that appellate decision fixed. Is that true or is that not true? Okay. She should have asked Caney that question too, as part of that so-called investigation. And she didn't. All she said to justify dismissing, she said, well, this happened a long time ago. People die, people forget things. That's how she put in there to dismiss it. Well, guess what? Nobody died. Posner was alive, still is. Caney he was still on the bench, probably in an office right next to hers at the Seventh Circuit. She could have walked right into his office and asked him that, and she didn't. And that's how they do things. That's how they cover these things up. And then I reported it I sent a letter to John Roberts, the Chief Justice. I told him about it. And then there's an administrative office of the United States courts. So I asked them, so I submitted it to them. I said, hey, the Seventh Circuit is covering this up. Okay. So you guys need to do something about this. So they're trying to sweep it under the rug. It's sitting there right now for several years now, no determination. They don't want to make a determination on it. I contacted my United States Senator in Indiana, Todd Young, said, hey, listen, this federal agency, United States Courts Administration, they're supposed to be looking into this court fixing going on at the Seventh Circuit. And I said, I want you to help me out with this and get some progress going with this thing. He sends me an email. This is the senator from Indiana, Todd Young. I wrote a letter to the U.S. Administrative Office about this, and I'll let you know what I hear. A couple of weeks goes by, I don't hear anything, so I contact them again. Say, hey, listen, what happened? Is there anything going on? Is there any progress being made? Then I get a response back from his aide, one of his aides, not him this time. Oh, well, we're working on it. We're working on it. So I said, hey, I would like to see a copy of that letter that Senator Young said that he sent on my behalf. And then she says, "Oh no, we don't give those letters out." I said, "What do you mean you don't? I'm a constituent. He did it. He said he wrote a letter on my behalf. I should be able to see a copy of that letter." So they won't give me it. They won't show me a copy of the letter. And because why? I don't believe he sent the letter. I do not believe he sent the letter because he would have wanted me to see that letter. There's no law that says we don't show them. They're supposed to show the constituents. I had communications with a congressman long ago about all this police stuff. He sent the letter to John Bolton. He sent me a letter. He sent me a copy of his letter. But see, even like the senator who's supposed to be the one away, that's a federal agency, the United States Courts Administration, and he's a federal senator. So he has jurisdiction to look into that. So he tells the constituent, "Oh, I wrote a letter." And then when constituent wants to see that letter, "Oh, we don't show that letter." Well, you know what? I believe that letter was never written. I think he lied about that. But that's how all this works. That's how this judicial corruption operates. It is safeguarded at every level, at every turn. That's how this works. So I wrote about all that in the book. I have all that, what I just told you. I have all that in the book. I talk about how the Seventh Circuit is covering it all up, how they're covering it up, how the Administrative Office of the United States is covering it up, how the U.S. Senator who said he wrote a letter about it doesn't want to show the letter. They are masters at cover up. That's how the judicial system in the United States operates. And that's what I talk about in the book. I have the names in there. I have the facts in there. And it's quite obvious. The fact that the chief judge of the Seventh Circuit, her name is Diane Sykes, Sykes. I don't know if people watch TV on things. This Charlie Sykes, he's on TV all the time. He's a big news. They were married. It's his former wife, and she's the chief judge there. And she chose, instead of actually getting the information, she chose to not get the information. She chose not to ask Posner if that was true. She chose not to ask Caney, the case fixer, if that was not true. Because if they would have admitted to it, she would have had to write that in the thing and actually done something. She would have had to take action. That's the problem with the system with judicial misconduct complaints in the United States. They are done in secret. Actually, after I filed it, I got a letter from the clerk of the Seventh Circuit in Chicago. He sent me a letter, and he said in the letter that I am prohibited from discussing the judicial misconduct complaint. He told me that I was prohibited under law from even discussing it. Okay, so you know what? That's a court document that's filed. When you file a judicial misconduct complaint in court, it's a court document. That's not something that's a protected under that's sealed, that's filed under seal. That's a court document that was filed. So to tell me that I am prohibited under some law that I can't disclose to the public, that the court is concealing criminal conduct. Case fixing is criminal conduct. And when I gave them the evidence of the case fixing that they chose to sweep under the rug, and then for them to say to me that I can't disclose the criminal conduct of that court, that's not going to fly. So another thing, when the order came out, it didn't say who the judges were. See, they call it a panel. It's a panel that the chief judge selects to investigate it. It's a judicial panel of some kind. So she assigned judges to it. At least she was supposed to. But when the order came out, there was no names of the judges on there. Any court order that comes out has the judges' names on it, who who participated in the decision, in the order, but it did not. It did not state the judges. So I emailed the clerk, Conway was his name, Chris Conway. I emailed him and I said, hey, listen, I want, this order does not say who the judges were who were involved in this decision. I want to know who those judges were. Okay. And surprise, surprise, they won't tell me. They will not disclose who those judges were. So why are they so afraid to say these are the judges who voted to dismiss the judicial misconduct complaint that they didn't want to get confirmation from Posner or Caney? Why do they not want me to know who they were? Because it's a corrupt system. And they don't want me to know who the corrupt judges are because the entire thing was corrupt. The evidence, Posner disclosed it. They could have got that from him. They chose not to. They didn't even get a denial from the case fixing judge, from Casey. They didn't even get a denial from him. And then when they wrote the order, they won't say who the judges were. Why are you afraid to say, show me a court order that doesn't have, show me one court order that doesn't have the names of the judges? And they wouldn't put the names on there because the whole thing was fixed. It's in Washington, D.C. right now. They're afraid to take action on it. And my senator from Indiana is telling me he wrote a letter about it and he won't show me the letter because he didn't write a letter. I think he lied about it. That's how corrupt the system is in the United States, the federal judiciary. That's how corrupt it is. It's in that book.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to link these. And for those of you who didn't catch Brian's first episode, we talked for a couple hours about what's in this book. And I would really encourage you guys to go support. Like he said, he does everything for free. These books are super affordable and they're just filled with knowledge. So I think all of us at some point are going to meet somebody, and it might even be us that ends up getting caught up in these court systems. And so I think, for one, these are great for you guys to educate yourself on, both of Brian's books, but also they make really great gifts if you guys know people that might be dealing with this and are looking for resources. You can give these to people and they'll help serve as education for people who are stuck, in these really horrific situations being taken advantage of from the court systems. And I'll have Brian's website too. You guys, like I said, can access that from his website. He has his books linked on there and it'll direct you to Amazon, but I'll also have just the Amazon links. And I encourage you guys to go check out his website too, his blog, go keep up on his media and where he's at. Watch more interviews. And that's another thing that you guys can share, and it's free. Share his interviews with people too. Share them on your social media, share them with people that are going through the court system and need help or resources. Pitch him to podcasters and to journalists if you guys have resources that could help elevate this information. Brian's story could really help a lot of people if we could get more attention on it. And he's done what a lot of people that face these situations haven't been able to. And I think the education and empowering people is just like he said, around bringing public attention to this topic, helping get exposure through bigger channels and audiences. And it's only going to be a matter of time before, the darkness comes to light. They can't hide behind this forever. There's too many people speaking out, and they can try to censor us. They can try to delete this information, but at the end of the day, it's all about people like Brian that just don't stop. And there's more and more that are stepping up and aren't stopping despite the barriers and boundaries that are being put on them from these court systems. So if we can help get some attention to this, I would love if you guys could help. And Brian is on social media too. He has a Twitter that I was showing earlier at motion4 justice, or you can just type his name in. I haven't seen anywhere I've typed your name in, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, your account comes up right away. You have a very unique last name. So it's also not difficult to just Google him or plug him in social media channels and see if you guys can see his name populate really quickly. So he's on Twitter, and then also under his name on Facebook. You guys should go follow him there too and help share on there. I think Facebook's also a good avenue to share this information, even though they're a little bit more censored. I think the court system is a little less conspiratorial than some other topics that are talked about on this podcast. It's a little bit more accepted that courts could be corrupt. It's not too far out of the line of thinking for a lot of people, even if they aren't educated on this. And I think Facebook has a good audience for this topic, a little bit more than some of the other stuff that is discussed on this topic. So if you guys can, go share his books, go share his information, repost, go follow him, get some eyes on him. All of that really helps when we're supporting survivors and whistleblowers as they come forth. If we can help be an army behind them, help funnel people to them that can help funnel them to people who need it. Like I said, it's only a matter of time before we start to break through this veil that's been over everybody's eyes. So Brian, I just want to thank you with all my heart for coming on again and for sharing. I hope next time that you're on that we can share really good news. And I know every time there has been good, you're still you're slowly penetrating and getting through, but I know that there's obstacle after obstacle. So hopefully we can have a conversation one day and we can talk about how you broke through all of it, but in the meantime, I'm really sorry for the things that have happened, but I'm also really proud of you and really excited for all the advancements that you've so fearlessly made in combating this and not letting your boundary down, not letting them step all over you, and doing it as a one-man show essentially.
Well, thanks, Emma. I appreciate that a lot. I really do. You've really done a lot to highlight the things that we have to deal with in our country and the judiciary. And if I could just add, you were talking about Facebook, and one thing we need to focus in a lot is on the problems in the family court system. I see a lot of stuff on Facebook about there. A lot of people, they're contacting me and so forth on there, and they're putting a lot of postings, the horrendous crimes. I haven't had any experience in the family court system, so I'm not trying to hedge away from the problems in the family courts because I haven't had any experience in the family court. Mine has always been with this other stuff that I've been talking about. With the civil rights issues, and so forth, and this case right now with Posner with the breach of contract thing, and but there are many horrendous stories, and I'm not so sure. I talk about judicial corruption a lot, and I'm starting to learn more and more about the family court system, and I'm not so sure that might not be the most corrupt part of the judiciary that there is actually is the family court system, with probably money going back and forth with the lawyers and the judges and so forth. Kids, are at stakes. The parents, we have all the disputes with the parents, and then the arguments about the kids and so forth. Kids are basically held hostage in a lot of those cases, and it's just horrendous. So we have to, I have to say to the family court people that are experiencing problems, I'm learning more and more about that, and I feel sorry about what's happening. And we need to put a highlight. We need to put a spotlight on what's going on in the corruption in the family court system as well. And I know that Emma is doing that. She actually specializes in that. So good job with Emmy. Thanks a lot, Emmy. Appreciate you having me come on here. You are absolutely one of the best and the most awesome in capital words, capital letters, awesome. AWESOME is Emmy.
Oh, you're awesome, Brian. You are capital awesome. And I love that you have such a good attitude despite all the hardships that you faced. That's also equally inspiring, just as inspiring as all the obstacles that you've overcome. So for everybody listening again, I'm going to have all of Brian's links in the show notes. I'll link the articles that we went over today. That way you guys can follow in real time or after this interview, go check them out. Also great resources to share too. They are mainstream publications, some of the ones that we talked about today. So it adds credibility for those people who think that this is a conspiracy or think that this doesn't happen. Go show them one of the publications and say, well, look, it made it on an actual publication that is mainstream. That's not just, tucked away in these conspiratorial corners of the internet. So again, Brian's helping legitimize and normalize these conversations. And, it's our due diligence to help elevate these stories. It's the very, very least that we can do. And I'll have his books in the show notes also. Again, buy as a gift for yourself or give to somebody else. Awesome, awesome resources. We all need to be empowered with knowledge. Knowledge is our defense against mind control, as Kathy O'Brien says. And it helps us take our power back. If we're informed, we feel more confident. We feel that we can overcome things that we can't when we're stuck in a moment and don't know what to do. So regardless of if we're going through this or not, like I said, you'll somebody in your life is going to go through the court system and get screwed over, and we just have to be prepared for that. And the best way that we can is by educating ourselves, and God forbid it's one of us listening, or, one of you on the other side of the screen that has to go through it. Don't ever think it can't be you. That's the thing that I've learned. Don't ever think it can't be you. Everybody that goes through the court system and gets screwed over never thought it could be them. They thought that they had an easy win, and they should have if the system was built on justice and fairness, but they don't. That's not how the court systems work. So we have to learn how they really work, so that way we can A, empower ourselves as we're going through it, but B, help elevate these stories and course correct, demand change in the court systems, demand justice for the victims that have been prey to the system. And I love Brian's ideas on some litigation that we can try to pass with how to make wrongful prosecutions more fair, in a sense of also prosecuting the person that screwed the victim over. I love that eye for an eye law that he talked about. So again, you guys, I'll have all that in the show notes. I'll have my links as well. We really appreciate you guys listening. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you guys for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.